Hello everyone, Rob here, and today I'm going to be covering how to secure an LDAP over SSL connection, and I'm also going to, in this process, cover how to set it up safely and securely so that no communication breaks between your client and the domain controller. The reason for configuring LDAP over SSL is because when LDAP binds occur, credentials are passed in clear text. So the reason for this is when those LDAP binds occur, we want to force an encrypted communication. That way passwords are not given away. By enabling LDAP over SSL on clients, we are not disabling LDAP. So don't block LDAP on your internal firewalls, unlike the Windows application firewall, anywhere there, because that is still used for things such as password changes, AD replication, things of that nature. When those are done, Kerberos authentication or Kerberos tickets and such are used so that your communication is secured. The LDAP over SSL gets forced with those insecure binds where the passwords get passed in clear text. So what we're doing here is defending against man-in-the-middle attacks as well as replay attacks where an attacker catches communication and then forwards it on to the domain controller with whatever modifications they might have put on the packet. So the next thing we're going to start out with here is installing the role and feature of LDAP over SSL, as it's not set up by default. So we have to go to, on our domain controller, go to Add Roles and Features in Server Manager. Then we're going to click Next 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And we want to make sure Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services is installed. On yours, if you don't have it installed, click Next all the way through to install it. If you need a restart after the install, please do that. And then after the restart, click on your flag up here and select Configure Lightweight Directory Active Services Setup or whatever. On mine, because I have it set up already, I just need to go to Tools and I can enter that wizard again by selecting this option here, Active Directory LDS Setup Wizard. And here I'm going to click Next. This is the screen you should see as well. If you have not installed it already, we are setting up a unique instance as this is not installed in our environment yet. And then we're going to click Next, name our service. You can call it LDAPS or LDAP over SSL, whatever floats your boat. And you'll see the service display name down here is LDAP over SSL. And the service name is Adam_LDAP over SSL. And this is typical. So we click Next. The port numbers here, just leave the defaults are fine unless you want to define something in the 50,000 port range. Really, it's not too big of a deal. Whatever you set, as long as it's probably above 50,000 and 60,000. Somewhere in there is probably good. But in doing this, you can't set this to 389 and 636 because it's almost like a local port forward where those ports get forwarded, where 50,000 would get forwarded to port 389 and 50,001 would get forwarded to 636. So just leave the defaults there. That's fine. You're not going to need to know them later. So here we're going to click Next. No, do not create an application directory partition. This is because we are, you can create it later if you need to, but we don't need it as we're just setting this up to work inside of our domain here. And everything already exists because we're inside of our domain. So here I'm going to click Next. Leave the defaults here. This is just a place to store the data files associated with the LDS service. Here you can leave the network service account. That is now the recommended action from Microsoft. And if you prefer, you can set an account here. This account will require logon as service permissions. If you don't know where those are at, gpedit MSC. They are under Computer Configuration, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Local Policies, Security Options, or sorry, not Security Options, User Rights Assignment, Logon as a Service. And as you can see here, just for this example, I have the LDAPS admins group added, and that means that they can start the LDAPS service, is what that is assigning there. So if I were to put LDAP here, entire directory, I guess I'll do. Maybe that'll help. There we go. Now I can assign the LDAP user account who's a member of that group. However, I suggest following Microsoft's recommendation and leaving the network service account. That's going to be what the service runs, the user that the service runs under. So a currently logged in user here, you can set it up with your current domain admin user. However, if there's other domain admins in your environment and you're the only person that has permission to work with the service, you're kind of messing with everybody there. So you want to select this account. You can create a group by going to Browse, or you don't create a group this way, but you can select a group by going to Browse. I created a group that you just saw called LDAPS admin, so I'm going to add that. So any members of this LDAPS admins group now have permissions to work with the lightweight directory service. So I'm going to click Next. Here we want to select all of these. You can click on one and then hit the space bar to get that check mark in there and just kind of go down space until you have them all selected, and then click Next. On yours, if you're installing this for the first time, you're going to click Next again. On mine, I'm not doing that. It's installed already, so I'm clicking Cancel. And excellent. So now we have the service installed. The next thing we're going to do is set up our certificate template for the LDAP over SSL service. So I'm on my certificate authority here for the domain. I go to Tools, Certificate Authority. And then in here, I want to drop down my domain, go to Certificate Templates, and this is what I want to work with. So I'm going to right click on Certificate Templates and select Manage. This is going to open my template console. Then from here, we want to duplicate our Kerberos authentication ticket. So I right click Kerberos authentication, select Duplicate Template. Leave all the defaults for compatibility. Under General, we want to name our CERT here. We'll just call it LDAPS. I already created my CERT, so I'm not going to create another one. We want to publish our CERT in the Active Directory. For request handling, we have to allow private key to be exported because we need to request the certificate, export it, and then import it into our NTDS and the LDAP over SSL service we just installed/created. So we need that selected. Cryptography, have at least a 2048-bit key here. You can leave the defaults are fine. For security, I always remove my username from here and just assign the groups. So domain admins, enterprise admins, I leave the defaults. Authenticated users, enterprise read-only domain controllers, leave those defaults. We're only going to change domain controllers by adding read and write to their enroll and auto-enroll permissions. And same thing for enterprise domain controllers, we're doing the same thing there. Once those permissions are set, we need to configure our subject name. So our name format needs to be DNS name, and then we need to select service principal name and DNS name in these checkboxes here. Soon as those are selected, our CERT is good to go, so I would click OK here to create it. Just to show you that mine was created here already with those settings. You can see it's published in Active Directory. I called it LDAPS CERT. Compatibility was left the same. Request handling, I have allow private key to be exported. Cryptography, I have a 2048-bit key. For security, I have authenticated users with read permissions, enterprise read-only domain controllers, enroll and auto-enroll. Domain admins and enterprise admins have read, write, enroll, and domain controllers and enterprise domain controllers have all allow except full control. So those are set the way we want. And under subject name, DNS name is selected from the drop-down, and DNS name and service principal name are checked in those boxes. So now we have the CERT that we need. We can close the certificate templates console. And now what I want to do is right-click on CERTs, certificate template, go to New Certificate Template to Issue. Then when this window appears, select the CERT that you just created and click OK. As soon as that imports, it's no longer going to appear in this window anymore, and it will appear in this one. And as you can see, mine is there here with LDAPS certificate. Now we have a CERT to assign to the service. So to do that, we need to go back to our domain controller. We're going to open up CERT local machine or CERTLM.msc. And this is our local computer CERT machine. So I want to right click on certificates or personal, depending on if you have certs already or not, and go to all tasks, request certificate or new certificate. And then we're going to click next. Next, because Active Directory enrollment policy is selected. And then we select the certificate template we just created. If you're not seeing it there yet, I've mentioned this in another video, but you can go up to Server Manager on your domain controller, go to Tools, Sites and Services, and then under NTDS settings or DC01, I believe it's NTDS settings, simply right-click on it and select Force AD Replication Now, or whatever that option is that says Force Replication. Do that for every one of your domain controllers in the environment, and then you'll be able to access your template if you were not just seeing it here. If it's not here yet, you have to click Cancel, and then go through that process again where I'll right-click on Personal, All Tasks, Request New Certificate, Next, Next, and then it should be there. So since I've created my CERT already, I'm going to show you its existence here. And this is the template, LDAPS certificate. And you can see I have the private key that corresponds to the certificate. Now we mark this private key as exportable because we're about to export it. So now I right-click on the CERT, go to All Tasks and Export. Then I click Next. Click Yes to export the private key because we need the private key in order to bind it to a service and have it be successfully used. So next we click Next. Leave the defaults there. And here we're going to set a password. Typically I set passwords for the certificates. You can do it by group as well. Just make sure, of course, that you document your password unless you're going to delete this file. And also, if you're an OpenSSL user such as myself, SSL is the only form of encryption here that OpenSSL works with. If you select AES 256, you're not going to be able to work with that PFX file to either extract or combine certificates because it's using an encryption method that the tool does not work with. So now we're going to click Next. And then we select our file name. We can see I have mine saved in my Downloads folder already, and it's called LDAPS CERT PK. I would click Save, Yes to replace it, and then Next is going to export it to that location. Since I've done that already, I'm not going to do it again, but if you would not click Cancel here where I am. And now that I have exported the CERT, we can close our local computer certificate manager. And then we want to open Microsoft Management Console. And we do that by doing mmc.exe. Open this with admin permissions. And once that opens, we click File, Add Remove Snap-in. Then we want to import two certificate services stores. So select certificates, click Add. Then select Service Account. Click Next, then Local Computer. And then we're going to first import Active Directory Domain Services and click Finish. Then we select Certificates again and click Add again. And this time Service Account, Local Computer, and then we scroll down to the LDAP service that we created, or the LDS service we created earlier. I called mine LDAPS. As you can see, that's the display name here. So I'm going to click Finish to select it. And now I have both modules I need in my console root. So I click OK to import them, and we're going to expand both of these here. Notice we have our Atom_LDAPS personal store and NTDS personal store. So under both of these, you want to right-click, All Tasks, Import, and now we're going to import the certificate we just exported. So we click Next, select our file, which does not show by default because it's a PFX. So we need to go to our drop-down menu here, and you can select all files here to show everything, and then select your PFX file, click Open, and then you would click Next to finish importing it. You would then need to follow those steps again to import it down on Atom_LDAPS. So you right-click on Certs, All Tasks, Import, click Next, select our file, and make sure that you go over here and select all files. Then we can select our PFX file and open, and then next should import our certificate again. And as you can see under this certificates for ADAM LDAPS, if I scroll to the right, I have my LDAPS certificate here, and it's in my personal store over here as well for the Active Directory domain services, and this is the cert there. And as you can see, the private key is attached to it, which means it can work with the service. So now if you like, you can restart the LDAPS service by doing, or whatever you called yours, by doing restart-service LDAPS. Or if you prefer to go into Services Manager, you can open services.msc, find LDAP here, right-click and select Restart. You can also restart that what is it called? Active Directory domain services up here if you like as well. So we'll restart that one too. Well, no, because you can on yours. I'm not doing it on mine because this is a video and I don't want that to take too long. So next thing we're going to do, we have our certificates assigned to the port. We want to cover our group policy settings. Now these are important to pay attention to. So on our domain controller here, to show you what we have so far, our current settings, if I go to gp-edit, first let's clear this out. If I go to gp-edit.msc, and then computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options, under domain controller, LDAP, channel binding, and server signing. Notice that the default values are always for the channel binding and none for signing requirements. That is what we want to keep for now. Our only other option here for none is to set this to required. Because I'm in the local group policy manager right now, this is grayed out. I need to be in the domain actual group policy management center to change this. But we want this set to none, and we're going to leave that set to none. The reason for that is, as soon as we set this to required, if we don't check our event IDs to make sure that clients are successfully binding and that there's no applications using LDAP instead of LDAP over SSL, this is going to break communication with them. And you'll notice they have the warning here, modifying this setting may affect compatibility with client services and applications. And that's how that breaks, is if this is set to required and the clients are set to none, they're not configured. Or you have an application that's configured to use LDAP and the domain controller is expecting LDAPS. So the way to configure this is if we open our Group Policy Management Center, we can do that on our domain controller by going to Server Manager, Tools, and then Group Policy Management. That opens our window here. Create a group policy client object by right-clicking New and then name it LDAPS settings client, something like that. LDAPS, wow, LDAPS settings client. I don't even need to type. So yeah, you create that policy. After it creates it, you right-click, select Edit. Then we're going to go to Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options, and then we want to go down to network security and configure our LDAP client signing requirements. Our first step in this is we need to set this to negotiate signing. That's going to push that out to all our, we want to push that out to all our desktops and laptops and servers and such. So set that to negotiate signing. And then right-click on laptops or whatever other OUs you have set in your domain and make sure that policy is assigned, which as you can see here, it's set to desktops. And also I'm going to mention on the policy setting, I have domain computers added to the security filtering to help make sure that setting gets applied. So if I go over to my desktop here, I have gp-edit open already, but you can see when I go to computer configuration and check on that local policy setting that we have it configured already to negotiate signing. That's great. We can test communication right now from our desktop computer or client to the domain controller server by doing the command and command prompt. So we would do nltest/sc query and then and our domain. So osbornepro.com in my situation. And here we can see this was successfully communicated with. And that's what we want. After that, we want to, so after you have negotiate signing configured on your clients, you want to keep an eye on your domain controller's event log. And you want to, so we can do that. Our domain controller, go to Server Manager, Tools, and then open Event Viewer. The next thing we want to do is enable the logging that we need. I believe it's enabled by default on Server 2019 because I didn't have to set this, I don't think. I'm going to have these commands inside the YouTube video description. So here I paste New-ItemProperty, and I'm setting a registry value that enables logging for LDAP. So I would hit enter. The error here is saying that the property already exists. That's expected. If you're a command prompt person, I have that command here for you as well. So you would enter command prompt, do the regadd command, and add the dword decimal value of 2. And then we select yes to overwrite, and we know logging is now enabled. This enables logging. Back over here on our event viewer. So back in Event Viewer, drop down Applications and Service Logs, and then we want to select Directory Service. This is where our important event logs are going to go. So there's two that you want to look out for. There's port 2889, or port event ID 2889, and event ID 2085. Yeah, 2085. 2085, I don't have any examples of here because they are saying basically that there was an issue setting up an LDAP over SSL connection with the client. If that happens, then the LDAPS connections are failing. You want to make sure negotiate signing is enabled on the client and none is on your domain controller. Typically, I see that error message or the event ID from vulnerability scanners. When they're testing insecure LDAP binds and such, you'll see that those devices generate those event IDs. But event ID 2889, which we can filter out here by clicking Filter Current Event Log, all event IDs 2889, and just for the heck of it, we'll do 2085. Click OK. And now you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events occurred here. And in the description, basically, what happened is an insecure LDAP bind happened where credentials were passed over the wire in clear text to authenticate the bind to LDAP. So typically you're going to see this with applications. For example, in ASA, if you don't have Cisco Firewall ASA, if you don't have LDAP over SSL configured for communication there, you will see that mentioned here. And notice here, client IP address. You will see, you will know the IP address of the clients that failed, so you can easily find them, go to wherever they're at, and configure LDAP over SSL. If you have any issues setting that up, 9 times out of 10, the issue is because the LDAP over SSL certificate authority is not trusted by the device. So you have to import the root CA certificate of your domain onto the device in order to trust the LDAPS certificate. I've done this with applications such as Bastillion, which is an SSH key manager, different Git programs like GitLab and Gitea, as well as help desk programs like JitBit and DeskPro and things of that nature. So you got to make sure you trust that certificate in order for that LDAPS communication to work and eliminate these 2889 error messages. Once you don't see these event IDs coming up anymore, you're good to change your group policy setting on the clients only now from negotiate signing to required. So we're going to do that in our domain controller. I can close out my event viewer here. Next thing I want to do is open my Group Policy Management Center, right-click on Settings, LDAP over SSL Client, and select Edit. Then I'm going to go to Computer Config, back to our same location as before, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Local Policies, Security Options, and then I only have one setting set here because that's all you need for LDAP over SSL on clients. And we're going to double-click Network Security, LDAP Client Signing Requirements, change our drop-down menu here from negotiate signing to require signing. Then we click OK. Click yes to continue with changes. As you see, we have another scary warning message here. We're fine setting this, and I'll show you that here. So we're going to click yes. Now what we can do is go over to our desktop. So I'm moving to our desktop computer. We're going to run a GP update to apply the new setting by doing GP update /force. Currently our setting is set to negotiate signing. After this update finishes, it's going to be set to required. So now we're going to do gpedit.msc again. Go to our settings location, and we can verify that require signing has now been configured. So as you can see here, network security, LDAP client signing requirements. And just to show you as well, on our domain controller, the value is still set to none. So if we'll close that out, and we'll close this out. Another thing I'm going to mention here, though we have not set the domain controller policy yet, the default domain controller policy is the only location where you can set those LDAP settings for the domain controller. You can put them in other group policy objects and assign them to the domain controller's OU, but they will not apply because these settings take precedence. So we go to computer configuration after opening our default domain controller policy. Policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options, and then you can see our server signing requirements are set to none. We're moving back to our desktop, and now we're going to do a test to make sure our communication is there. As you can see, our client is still set to require signing. DC is set to none. So we do nl test /sc query, and then we're going to do our domain, and we still have a successful connection message. So that's good. That's exactly what we want. After you set this, wait a little bit longer, week, a month, whatever you feel comfortable with, to make sure that you're not getting any of those event IDs in your event viewer on the domain controller anymore. Again, those were event ID 2889 and event ID 2085. This way you're knowing for sure that there's no failed LDAPS communication and nothing's going to break between any of the other applications or services that you have in your environment. Once we verify that's the case, we can come over here and set our default domain controller policy. So to do that, we would right-click on default domain controller policy and select edit, and then go to our settings, same as before, and this time modify domain controller server signing requirements and set this to require signing. Before I set that, I'm going to show you a test that we're going to set up here. So on our domain controller, I'm opening LDP.exe. And what this is a way to test LDAP connections. So I go up here to the left corner and select connection, and then go to connect. Right now we're going to do this is not what we're doing. We're going to do a bind, sorry. So connection bind. And then we want simple bind selected, and then we're going to enter a password of a user who's able to query the domain. Then we click OK. And notice down here we see LDAPS or LDAP simple bind _s and then my ID, which is my email or user principal name, one of those. And this is my username I authenticated as. Once we configure the domain controller to require LDAP SSL binds, this should fail. We want to see a strong authentication required message here. So I'm going to leave that up temporarily, set this to require signing on our domain controller and click OK. Then I click yes. And then here we can do GP update /force to update our domain controller. And just to show you over here as well, our client is on require signing. If you have your client set to none and then your domain controller is set to required, you're going to break connections. So that's going to prevent group policy from updating, user authentication, logon scripts. Also, I forget if I mentioned it earlier or not, but by setting up LDAP over SSL, you are not preventing the use of typical LDAP communication on port 8389. Domain replication is still used in that manner as our password changes. So now that our domain controller, which I'm on right now, is set to require signing, we can verify that setting was applied by checking our local group policy settings at gpedit.msc and then going to our location there. And under domain controller, we see require signing is set, and that is also set on our desktop. So now I'm going to go to our desktop and do a client to server test by doing that NL test /sc query osbornepro.com, and we can see this connection was successful. On the domain controller, now what we want to see in our LDP instance, if you forget how to open this, just simply you can go to your search in Windows, LDP.exe, and that's what that icon looks like. Next, we want to go to connection, disconnect, because we're connected already. Then we want to go to connection bind. And here we're going to enter our password again while simple bind is selected. Oops, I entered that in wrong. Sorry about that, folks. Click OK. And now down here you can see we have that error message I mentioned earlier where LDAP simple bind S failed, strong authentication required. That is what we want to see. We don't want to see this, otherwise we know our domain controller is not requiring LDAP over SSL connections. So we have this set correctly. The other thing we're going to do here, let me close this out and open it again by doing LDP.exe. We're going to go to connection, connect, and then 636 is our LDAP SSL port. Select SSL and a domain controller, enter in here and click OK. Notice these couple error messages. That is normal behavior because I created a certificate specifically for LDAP over SSL. This is checking my local machine's certificate store, which can be accessed by doing CERT/LM.msc. And in my personal store, anything with a certificate server authentication value of, where is it here? Here we go. Anything with this value here, server authentication 1.3.6.1.5.5.7.3.1. Anything with that is going to be tried first. So it's normal to see this. It's not going to break anything. It's expected behavior, I guess you could say. So I'm going to close that out. We covered our certificates, how to test it on our server, how to check event logs, how to enable the event log, and that is everything I wanted to cover. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to post them under the video here, or shoot me an email at info@osbornepro.com, and I'll be happy to do what I can to help. Thanks for watching.